Welcome to the NEREJ NYREJ podcast. I'm your host, Rick Kaplan. My guest today is Jon Hilley, and he is with 1031 Specialist, and we always know how everyone's interested in what's going on with 1031 exchanges. So Jon is going to tell us a little bit about that during this podcast, as well as, Jon, tell us about your journey to how you got to where you are today.
Hey, great to be here with you, Rick, and thanks for having me. Um, so I grew up in a little town called Jupiter, Florida, and I say little town because it used to be a little town, but all the golfers have figured out where that is and love it, and it's turned into quite a big town. Um, but I grew up there, went to school at the University of Florida, and right after UF, I got a job at Goldman Sachs. And so, the way that I think about my sort of journey after after high school, is sort of a meandering one, really. I think some people are really able to draw a straight line when they're younger about, hey, here's what I want to do when I'm 60, okay, and then they sort of work backwards and have a real plan. I think for me, it's been quite the opposite of that, but that's made it interesting. So I sort of look at what I have done so far in three different phases of a career, and this being the third phase, which we'll talk about firm and what I'm doing in 1031 world. But the sort of phase one, I spent as an investor. So I started at Goldman Sachs. After 3 years there, I moved to a firm in Miami called HIG Capital. HIG Capital is a very large private equity fund. It also has distressed debt. At the time, had long short equity research and an investing platform. And so that's where I was a long short buy side analyst at HIG Capital. Got through the great financial crisis there, which was harrowing to say the least. And then my mentor at Goldman left and started a private family office. So I went to run research there. And so this entire span of time was about 10 years. And at that firm, we were really unconstrained into what we did, right? So we were investing across geographies, across asset classes, up and down the capital structure. And one of the things we did sort of, near the tail end of my time there is we started investing and we're one of the early investors in cannabis companies. And so after 10 years
What was that you said? Because you kind of
yeah, we started investing in cannabis companies.
Oh, cannabis. Okay. That's what I thought I heard, but I was
Yeah.
checking.
No, you're right. You heard it right. And so that really kind of kicked off phase two of my career so far. And, I had spent 10 years as an investor, and I said to myself, okay, like that's been fun. But I'd love to actually understand the operations. So I decided, okay, let me switch to operator mode, and then spent the next 10 years in the cannabis industry. And that had some really nice wins. We had some exits in some of our early investments. So I became CFO and then CEO of some of these firms. And the last firm is a company that still operates today out of the Denver area called Mile High Labs. And that's the opportunity that sort of brought me out to Denver from South Florida. So the family moved out here, and that was sort of a wild one. And we can talk about this one for hours, but the short of it is, if you want to talk about roller coaster, that was probably the definition of a roller coaster. We went from 4 investment banks in a room writing an S1 to scrambling to try to figure out how to save the company 6 months later. And all of the things that happened in between were just absolutely wild. But it was an interesting journey. COVID hit. I scrambled to find sort of a white knight investor to take over the firm. We did that. I stayed on an extra year. And so that entire span of time across the cannabis industry was about another 10 years. Um, and I stayed on for one more year after we sold the firm. And I told myself I am never being involved in that business ever again. So that is not, that is not for me anymore. And so I had some time to really reflect, and this was also during, during COVID, but reflect and think about what was next, and started, reconnecting with old friends and figuring out what they were working on, and started kicking around this idea in real estate. Um, and it was a different idea than what I'm doing today, but it related to a product called Delaware Statutory Trusts. Okay, so DSTs have become quite a popular product that someone can 1031 into. And I think there's specific reasons why they've become so popular, particularly around the ability to go from kind of active real estate ownership into passive ownership. But there are some issues with the product as a general rule. And so we started kicking around this idea there. I spent about 6 months working on it. And, I just told myself, well, look, the idea we're thinking about completely has merit. Someone should build this, but it's probably going to take 5 years to build it. It's probably going to cost $50 million. And I just went on that journey with my last company. I am not doing that again. And so, but that entire ecosystem that we were orchestrating there, and that idea shined a light on these small little firms called qualified intermediaries. And so I told myself, I don't want to do this big thing. I can self-fund and build this little thing down here. And the more work I did on it to understand both how qualified intermediaries operate and serve investors, but also the market structure, the players, how they do their business, the more convinced I became that this was an opportunity worth pursuing. And so started 1031 Specialists about 3 years ago now. And, if you sort of rewind the clock in my career between my partner, Jeff, and myself, we've probably built, well over 1,000 models of companies and businesses. And guess what, Rick? They are never correct. Okay, you are usually wildly off for some reason, expected or unexpected, about what you think the future is going to look like for a firm. Okay, but part of my process for this was I built a presentation to myself, and I built a financial model for myself, just to convince myself, is this worth pursuing? And I will tell you 3 years later, this is the only one out of 1,000 that has been absolutely bang on expectations. So we're already one of the top 10 firms in the country that do this business. We are growing and growing quickly. We've got the support of some amazing partners, which we can talk about, including the NAR REACH program, which is really interesting. So yeah, it's worked really well. And, I like to think of what we do today as, we're sort of in the business of delivering joy to investors. And we'll talk about what a 1031 is and that stuff, I'm sure. But the truth is, if you're an investor and you want to do a 1031 exchange, you are required to hire a firm like mine. And what you get at the end of it is tax deferral and tax savings. And so I think about what we do now as we're in the business of delivering joy to investors. We don't have unhappy customers ever. And so it's a really interesting and nice business.
Well, we do talk about 1031 exchanges quite frequently. I know there's always a lot of interest, especially when I do my events. I usually will have someone from the 1031 industry sit on a panel and talk about what's going on. It does change from year to year, so They might tweak it a little, might be a little better, might be a little worse, but never really, it pretty much overall has stayed the same for the past, what, 3 years, pretty much. But it's very important to keep that in place, uh, because it's a great tax tool. I mean, that's my opinion, and I think people in commercial real estate need that because the kind of money is that's thrown around.
Yeah.
You know, that's just my thought on it. But
Well, I mean, yeah, my view is not too dissimilar, Rick. I mean, uh, what was crazy, what is still crazy to me, okay? This is a totally free lunch that the US government provides, okay? You could get into a 1031 exchange and decide I don't like what I've identified, I can't find anything I want in the time window, and you can sort of drop out of your 1031 exchange. And what are the consequences of dropping out? There are none. There are none. Okay. For our clients, we only charge $1,200. We give them the feedback, so they're not out of pocket anything. Um, and so my view is, and yet, despite the fact that it's a free lunch, okay, only 1 in 7 investment sales in this country are 1031. Okay, it's 15%. Now, it'll never be 100% because, well, there's a bunch of non-taxable entities that own a lot of real estate in this country, but it should be closer to 50%. And that if you wanted to cut through the mission of 1031 specialists or ask, what does success look like for us? It is if the frequency of 1031 exchanges goes from 15% today to 50% over the next 10 years. And I think there's specific reasons why it's so low today. Those things we're going after and trying to change. But yeah, I think the default position for any taxable person or entity should be I'm getting into a 1031. And I'm going to maintain that optionality to defer those taxes. Because deferring those taxes in one single transaction is entirely beneficial. But if you do it over a series of transactions and get to compound tax free, you're going to be, far, far, far better off when you look back 10 years later. And there's a one of the posts I did on X went viral, and it's a simple table. It compares, basically a starting place of $100,000 of equity and compounding at 50% each time. Okay. And so you just sort of run the math on, 50 turns, 100 turns into 150, turns into 225. You keep going like this, right? And then you have two columns. One is paying tax each time at 30%. And in places like, New York, it's even higher. The other table is compounding tax-free and deciding to do a 10. And after 10 transactions, assume you could do 10 1031s in your career. Okay, that's not implausible. If you do the 1031 exchange, you're going to end up with $5.75 million. And if you don't, you're going to end up with $2 million. You're going to be $3.75 million wealthier by choosing to defer your tax. And then you say, okay, well, what if you did 20? And this is where compounding really starts to impact later in life. Buffett made the vast majority of his money actually when he hit 70s, right? Because it just compounds. But after 20 transactions, okay, so now you look at 20 transactions, same assumptions. You're $300 million richer by doing a 1031 exchange each time. And so this just speaks to what we call, the magic of 1031s, right? But it really is just an expression of the power of tax-free compounding. And yeah, so for me, so the math is clear, whether it's one transaction or many, the default for everyone should be to retain that optionality. So you can hire, my firm, 1031 specialists. You can get into your exchange, create that optionality, and boom, then you find something you want, or you've done the work beforehand is really our strongest advice. Do the work beforehand. And you've deferred those taxes, got an interest-free loan from the US government. So why not do that?
Yeah, so I mean, it makes a lot of sense. As far as someone that is looking to grow in their commercial or, well, I think you can do this as a residential as well, real estate business. If you're buying something that is of more value from the property you sold, that's how the 1031 exchange will work, right?
No, I mean, you can do a partial 1031 exchange and still get some tax benefit. Right.
Okay.
So let's make this concrete through a number, through a few numbers. You sell a property for $1 million. That's your gross sales price. I'm not talking about the debt or equity components. That doesn't matter for a 1031. Okay. But your gross sales price on your fourplex is $1 million. Okay. Let's assume you've got 50,000 of closing costs, which primarily would be the broker fee and then some small title and escrow fee. Our $1,200 fee is in there too. But let's add all that up and let's assume it's 50,000. So 1 million minus 50,000 is 950K. That is your net sales price. And that is also your reinvestment goal. Okay, so if you reinvest 950 or more, you can invest 9.5 million. But 950 or more, you will get the full tax deferral benefit. Now you can, of course, reinvest less than 950, but every dollar less will be taxable. Okay. So if you invested 850 and you're going to be taxed at a blended rate of 30%, you're going to owe $30,000 in tax. So you can do partial exchanges. There is, however, a point when you reinvest too little and there is no advantage to doing a 1031. So I tell clients all the time, we need to do two different math equations. What's the tax impact if I just sell and not do a 1031? And then what are the taxes if I sell and do a partial 1031 exchange? And then you compare those numbers and figure out what you want to do, right?
But you can also buy multiple properties.
The beauty of a 1031 is the almost unlimited options that you have as an investor. I mean, you can go from multifamily into an office building or into a strip mall. You can buy multiple rental properties and diversify. You can buy assets that don't even cash flow. You can buy ranch or raw land. You can buy billboards. You can buy air rights. You can buy water rights or oil and gas rights even. So there's all of these different types of sub-asset classes of real estate that qualify for 1031 exchange. The main rule is it cannot be personal use property. The IRS defines personal use as you using it personally more than 14 days a year. Okay. So, and you can buy any of these sub-asset classes in real estate anywhere in the country. And so if you start thinking about it, your options are in the billions. I mean, truly. And so, just think hard about what you want, what's familiar to you, what's going to provide you the best return, and make that investment.
Jon, let's talk about because this is the latest trend is the Airbnbs that are out there. So people are buying, houses and they'll keep them for 2, 3 years. They'll sell it and they'll buy more houses and they Airbnb them. How does that work with a 1031 exchange?
It works exactly the same as
Same way?
any other piece of real estate. You can sell your office building, buy a portfolio of Airbnbs, and then you've just diversified. And you can do that. You can buy an Airbnb in New York, you can buy one in Florida, you can buy one in California, you can buy one in Hawaii if you wanted to. So not only do you get the diversification of the asset class, but you get the geographical diversification as well. The thing that's interesting for me is because of the short-term rental phenomenon over the last, nearly 20 years, the incidents where realtors specifically are running into not family home sales, but actually investment sales has been increasing every single year. Okay. And today, in some parts of the country, 1 in 4, home sales, and homes kind of in air quotes because it includes condos, townhomes, and single family detached homes. But if you look at that data, in some parts of the country, like San Diego, 1 in 4, so 25%, are actually investment property. And so realtors are running into more and more investment sales and need some really quick ways and easy ways to talk about 1031s with their. Why? Because, well, it helps the client understand that this is a tool that exists out there. It's easy to do. They should try it. And also the realtor and broker on the other side, it's an opportunity to, appear different than everyone else that's trying to get that listing. It's an opportunity to maybe win the other side of that 1031 exchange and be the buy side representation. So it's one of these rare things where just this knowledge, there's a big knowledge gap that exists. People think or hear the word 1031 like kind exchange, and they get so confused by these words because they are confused. I call them, I say like kind are the two most confusing words in the English language, because you think I gotta go from that Airbnb in my neighborhood to another Airbnb in my neighborhood, and I don't know what to buy. That is absolutely not true. It just means U.S. investment property for U.S. investment property, and that is broadly defined, as I mentioned. And so I think if the advisor, the broker, the realtor can shrink the knowledge gap, and you can do this very quickly with just a few questions, everyone is a winner there. Everyone is a winner. And we still get calls, Rick, every week saying, "Hey, I just closed on the sale of my Airbnb. I've got the funds. Can I wire them to you because I'd like to do a 1031 exchange?" Well, ma'am, no, you can't, because if you've already received those funds and closed on the sale, the opportunity to do a 1031 exchange is lost. And so the 3 rules that are really simple for anyone are: hire the qualified intermediary, that's the exchange services company like us, hire us up front prior to sale. Hit the 2 key deadlines on your exchange, and you'll be successful. That's it.
That's easy.
Easy.
So let me throw out this scenario. Someone has their own personal home, but it's under a LLC. They sell it and they buy another home for more money. Could that be considered a 1031 exchange? Because it's not, it's under a company that owns it.
Yeah, so any corporate entity or individual can do a 1031 exchange. So you can be LLC, whether it's a disregarded entity because it's just a single member LLC, or a C corp, a partnership, an S corp, a trust. Any entity can do a 1031 exchange. However, it still must be an investment property. You must sell an investment property. You must buy an investment property. So, look, when you own a home, you get Section 121 exclusion. Okay. So in your personal property, you get the first, 250 or $500,000 tax free of gains. Okay. And everyone accesses this. But so for investment properties, it's the 1031. So 121 personal property, but there's a cap on the benefit, right? And then 1031, there's really no cap. You can keep deferring. But no, you cannot own a property you live in or use more than 14 days a year, and then whether it's in an LLC or not, go and 1031 that. Okay. If you, prior to selling, if you decided I'm going to turn this into an investment property and you rent it for 2 years, then now it's an investment property, and now you can go in 1031, right? There's also the cases where you live in a duplex, and so you live in one unit and the other unit you're renting it out. Well, what do? You take 121 exclusion for your personal residence, okay, and get a tax benefit there. And the other 50% of the property, you can 1031 and get the 1031 benefit. So, but remember, in all of these cases, it's investment property. The 1031 is just for the investment property.
Okay. I'll have to I'll have to keep that in my head. And actually I knew that. I don't know why I even asked that question because it after I asked it, I said, "Oh, that was a stupid question." Because
There are no stupid questions.
but
Yeah, no.
hey, yeah, I mean, it's it's pretty black and white, but you need to have a specialist that will take care of the whole thing for you.
It's
If
required.
someone like you weren't involved in it, you really couldn't get it done.
Well, it's part of the rules. I mean, you have to hire a qualified intermediary. And by definition, this is a weird word. You don't come across this word in other parts of your life, qualified intermediary. But but it qualified intermediary means you cannot be disqualified, is what I want to say. And the people disqualified from doing this work for you are people that you've hired to help um, do other things. Okay, so for example, your CPA that does your taxes cannot be your qualified intermediary. Your broker that's involved in the transaction cannot be your qualified intermediary. Your attorney helping close is also disqualified. And so there's this rule around these independent third parties that the IRS terms qualified intermediaries. And it just says if you're doing a 1031 exchange, you are required to bring in this independent third party to quote unquote facilitate the exchange. Now, what does that mean? It means our role in the transaction is threefold. Okay, we do three things for clients. But I think it's important to note when you go in and sell your property, a 1031 exchange happens just like any other transaction. Okay, you'll still have a broker involved. Typically, you'll have title and escrow. It's just that with a 1031 exchange, we are another party that needs to get brought to the table. Okay. And so our job as an industry, right? I'm not just talking about my firm. This is the job of any QI is to consult with clients to make sure that you understand how to be successful at your exchange. Okay. Um, it is to produce the exchange documentation, the paperwork that gets you the tax benefit. And then the other role, the important role is at close, you can't take receipt of your funds from the sale of your property. Okay, so any equity left over needs to go and the QI will maintain responsibility of those funds during the exchange period. Okay, so we consult clients, produce paperwork, and hold on to their funds during the exchange. That is the job. And those are the latter two are the required elements from the IRS.
And to be clear, most property owners that uh, they, they shouldn't depend on their broker, their attorney, or their accountant to tell them to do the 1031 exchange. It's something that they should know beforehand, uh, uh, because they have to put the process in place because that's not up to an attorney or a broker or an accountant. Some accountants will tell you about it and direct you in the right. Some attorneys might also, or some are brokers, but most of the time they're not. So the education of 1031 exchanges is left up to the property owner.
That is true. I would also say, you know, there's typically always a broker involved in a commercial sale, right? And clients do rely on brokers to give them a heads up, like, hey, you know, it's as simple as this if you're a broker or even a realtor and you're coming across an investment property. Hey, you've owned this property a long time. You may have quite a few gains and quite a few taxes coming. Are you prepared to pay that, or would you rather look at ways to defer those taxes? Okay, that's question one. Okay, the recognition that it's a property that's been owned a lot. You're not giving investment advice. You're not giving tax advice. You're just saying, hey, you've owned this a long time. You probably have a lot of embedded gains. Are you prepared to pay, up to 40% in tax? Or do you want to defer it? Um, and then, regardless of what the client says or the prospective client says, you ask, are you familiar with a 1031 exchange? Because so many are just not. Okay. And they'll either say, yes, I've heard about it, or no. And the third question is, can I introduce you to 1031 specialists? And so all you've done is inform them that there's a material thing they need to be concerned about, right? When they sell, you're introducing this concept, and to many, it's for the first time. Remember, only 1 in 7 transactions is 1031, so that means, by definition, the minority of people, the majority of people don't know about it, or there's a minority that do know about it, right? And then the third is you're being the conduit to the experts and professionals that do. And so but that is, if you want to move from, Bob Knackle's a big personality in the real estate world in New York City, and I'm paraphrasing a bit here, but kind of the highest level of attainment for a broker is to be a trusted advisor. So you go from just selling real estate to being a trusted advisor to your clients, and this is a shortcut to getting there. Honestly, it's letting them know that this thing exists and there's a true benefit. And if your client, we've had some of our broker partners, because we partner with hundreds of brokers across the country. Okay, they trust us to serve their clients, and we will even create collaterals with their image and brand on it, not ours. Okay? It doesn't say 1031 specialists anywhere. They will use this collateral to take to listing appointments, the meetings, and in certain cases, it's won them the deal. Why is that? Well, because instead of saying, here are the comps, here's the marketing plan, here's how I'm going to sell your property, they say, of course, I'm the best person and firm to sell this property. I want to talk about what's next for you. And what are we going to do to defer those taxes, get you into a better asset, either more diversification, higher cash flow, more depreciable basis that we can then use to write off your other income. They do that and they win the deal, because it's a totally different conversation that you can then have with this prospective client than anybody else has had. And it's an easy conversation to have too. Everyone wants to learn how to, make better investment returns and put more money to work for them. And this is the obvious way to do it.
Well, I think it's very important as far as who you're working with, as far as a broker or an attorney or an accountant, if they give you this advice to look into a 1031 before we do this transaction, you're going to look like a hero in their eyes, or in your eyes, they'll look like a hero. And that in return will be better for the broker or the lawyer or the attorney, or the accountant, to have them be referred to other people. It's just a great business tool for them.
Absolutely.
So I think that's something that they should all be doing, but that doesn't always happen.
Doesn't.
So you agree with me?
Totally agree. Yeah, and I think it's not because it's intentional. It's just that. Well, let me ask you something, Rick. I mean, you know this business. You know qualified intermediaries. You invite them to events, conferences. Have you ever heard a radio ad for a 1031 exchange company?
Never.
Have you ever seen a TV commercial?
Except I have seen it advertised many times in articles in the New England and New York Real Estate Journal.
In articles? Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of print, but have you ever seen a TV commercial?
No.
This is actually the core thesis for for why I started 1031. Okay. You've got four main firms that I compete with, okay, that control 80% of the market. They are all subsidiaries of publicly traded companies, and they've been doing this work for 30, 40, 50 years. And yet, even though they have access to insane amounts of capital, way more than me, they don't spend a material dollar on advertising or marketing. And this gets to, the broker, the CPA, you'd be shocked, and you would be shocked at the number of professionals that operate in this category that just don't know a whole lot about it. Sure, they've heard about 1031, but maybe they don't know about the qualified intermediary requirement, which is a big one, right? This is like a huge requirement. You have to bring in the QI prior to closing the sale of your property. And so you've got these four giant firms that, for whatever reason, have decided we're not going to educate the country about this topic. And the big opportunity, and we have part of our business is outreach to commercial brokers. So we've cold called, I don't know, 5,000 to 10,000 commercial real estate brokers in the past 3 years. Talk to them about their 1031 business, how important it is to their business, and then help them understand how we can help, right? You would be like the one that we asked them a couple of key questions. Number one is who's your QI? Who's your qualified intermediary? And most brokers just sort of shrug their shoulders and say, I don't really have one. Okay. And then the ones that do, you ask them a follow-up question, which is, well, what does your QI do? And that stops everyone in their track. And some will start saying, well, they provide a good service to me. No, that wasn't my question. My question is, what do they do for you specifically? And so we think of our business as having two clients in every transaction: the broker that we serve and treat as a client, as well as the investor client. But my point about kind of this reach out and the really low incidence of brokers having a QI or an attachment to a partner like us is, for me, there is, based on the early research I did and the on-the-ground cold calling that we still do today, there is a clear opportunity for a national brand to emerge in the 1031 exchange service. And that is the thesis of 1031 specialists, is being the household brand. When you think about 1031s, you think about that gold and black logo, and that's the first place you'll call because they're the best. And so this all gets wrapped up into, well, there's a lack of education, there's a lack of marketing dollars in this category. The big four are generally asleep at the wheel or not really trying. And that then opens the window for a company like mine that's a newer company. I mean, we've got, 150 years of combined exchange experience. So don't confuse the newness of the company with the experience of the professionals. But yeah, that is the opportunity we're going after, is to be that household brand, to educate investors and brokers and CPAs about the power of the 1031 exchange. So I feel really good about where we're at. And even since we started and we're making waves in the industry, hasn't changed any behavior from the big four. They're still just sitting there doing a bunch of nothing on the marketing side.
Well, John, we're coming to the close of the show, but before we go, what's your website? So if people want to find out more information about your company.
Yeah, sure. So we're at 1031 specialists with an S at the end.com. And also just call us anytime. It's 631-GET-1031. So it's 631-438-1031. And yeah, we're, most of the work we do, we don't sell our business or services. We consult for free and educate. And so if you have any questions, call us, email us, hit the website. We're ultra responsive. That's the thing we care most about. And yeah, we're here to spend time with you, make sure you know what you need to do to be successful at your exchange.
So if you own any property and you're looking to sell, or if you're an attorney or an accountant or real estate broker, now residential or commercial,
Absolutely, as long as the product being sold is an investment property.
okay, and they go to your website or they call that number and they can get the information that they need that they can out to their clients,
Absolutely,
and that will make them look like heroes
absolutely.
if they go through it. Okay, easy enough.
Easy peasy.
Yeah. Well, John, I thank you for coming on the show. A lot of good information about 1031 exchanges. And like I've said, it's a very popular product out there. And it's only being used by people that are familiar with it. And if young people, especially that have been buying property, should really know about this because this is something that they'll run into, and it also helps them build a much larger piece of the pie, if you will say, if they follow through with the 1031 exchanges when they're looking at purchasing or selling and repurchasing new properties. So,
Absolutely.
well, again, thank you, John. I appreciate you coming on. We're talking with Jon Hilley, and he is with 1031 Specialists. And again, your phone number again, John?
631 get 1031. So 631-438-10.
Okay, and your website again.
It's 1031 specialists with an S at the end.com.
I appreciate that, John. Thank you again. And I'm Rick Kaplan with the NEREJ, NYREJ podcast. Until next time.